Hello and welcome to Deal Flow, the show that tracks merger and acquisition activity in Africa and beyond. A fascinating show lined up for you. The regulatory landscape that directs the nature and volume of M&A activity in South Africa has changed dramatically in recent years and at many levels. We're looking this week at requirements for black economic empowerment, how these have changed and how that has influenced corporate action. We start off by updating you with the deals of the week first. South African furniture retailer Steinhoff International said this week that it would acquire Austria's Kika Group as part of its strategy to bulk up across Europe. Aspen Pharmacare declared it would acquire drugs and a plant from US firm Merck in a $1 billion deal that bolsters its presence in Europe, Latin America and Asia. Indian state oil firms ONGC and Oil India have signed an agreement to buy a 10% stake in a Mozambique gas field from India's Videocon Group for $2.48 billion. Rio Tinto has scrapped the proposed sale of its $1.3 billion diamonds business, denting its plan to divest mines. This comes as the diversified mining giant tightens operations during an industry downturn. And billionaire Oracle CEO Larry Ellison may be interested in acquiring a second Hawaii airline, this after he bought most of the tropical island of Lanai last year. Lafarge SA, the world's largest cement maker, has agreed to sell its North American gypsum business to US private equity firm Lone Star for $700 million as part of efforts to refocus and cut debt. Joining me now in studio to discuss the influence of black economic empower regulation on deal flow in South Africa is Shabbir Norath, Head of Corporate Finance at Nedbank Capital, and Greg Benjamin, Corporate Finance M&A Advisory Leader at Deloitte and Touche. Welcome, really good to have you here. So black economic empowerment has been a significant and important driver of M&A activity in past years, but we've seen sort of a shifting regulatory landscape around that, and most likely that will influence the deal making going forward. Shabbir, do you agree with that?
Absolutely. I think government policy has been largely responsible for driving M&A in South Africa. But you can see that corporate South Africa has embraced BEE, not simply from a tick box exercise, but largely to make sure that BEE is all encompassing. It includes a large portion of South Africa. It's broad based. When we look back to see how the earlier BEE deals that have been done, a lot of them were done with certain personalities. If you kind of look now to see how BEE deals are done, they are done with which are much more broad-based to an extent where companies are incorporating the communities around which they operate. They include their staff, and to some extent they include their customers in those deals.
Greg, going back to the early days, what were some of the benchmark BEE deals? I mean, one thinks of the mining houses, there was Sasol, MTN, Vodacom, and many more. Those were the big names.
Exactly. I think going back, BEE deals started off really in the large listed space, and that's why if you look at the size or the value of deals in the past compared to the value of deals that are done today in the BEE space, there's quite a significant difference. So if you look at around 2008 when we were at our peak of BEE transactions, I think it was around 18 billion were done in the BEE space, or around 300 billion in M&A transactions in the country. Whereas in 2012, at the end of last year, that dropped all the way down to around 7 billion. So it was around 18% in 2008 in the peak of M&A and the peak of BEE M&A, whereas today it's only making up around 3 to 3.3% of the M&A transactions that are taking place in the market at the moment.
So what does that say, Shabbir, that the deals were done? Or can we expect that to start changing as these deals mature, unwind, and new deals need to be put in place?
Well, if you look at the BEE deals, most of them are in their midterms, midway through the life cycle. Some of them are coming towards the end of their deal term. What we will see is BEE parties exiting after a particular period of time, particularly after the lock-in period. We can see an upsurge in BEE activity once this is done. I don't believe it will be to the same extent as what it was in the past, because largely at that point in time there weren't too many BEE deals, and there was pressure on companies to get those deals done. What we expect is to be top-up deals where companies will look at deals to see from their entire scorecard to see what is it that they really need to do to get those empowerment points that they require.
Right. And this is a pivotal point, because we've got new BE codes, regulations, some of it's still in progress. We had our submissions to the DTI generic codes towards the end of last year. We don't quite know how those will pan out. We've got certain sector codes. So Greg, the fact that the DTI codes haven't yet been promulgated, does that create some uncertainty and with some companies perhaps holding back on their BE deals?
I think there's some level of uncertainty around it, but I think we should also be clear around what the regulation is, because the regulation starts at the BE Empowerment Act, then you talk about the codes, and then you talk about the charters, and there's 3 separate pieces. But the bill that's currently last week went through the National Assembly, but still has a couple of parliamentary processes to go through. I mean, that's the amendment bill that looks at changing the code. So there is going to be some significant changes to the codes. Historically, we've always had 7 pillars. We're now moving to 5 pillars and different points for each of those pillars, etc. But I think this change will give some clarity to what people need to do in order to meet their strategic objectives. And I think on the back of that, I think that's certainly going to be a driver of BE transactions. At Deloitte, we've certainly been having a number of transactions with a number of conversations with a number of our clients around doing transactions. And that bit of clarity has always been kind of what is the expectation, and it's a grey area. At least this will at least paint it in either black or white, and what we need to do in order to meet the objectives of the Charter and meet the spirit of what I think what the country and the governments are trying to do with empowerment.
Greg, at what point will the grey become black and white, as in certain?
I think there's elements of it that will become black and white, but the truth is M&A is a space which, in my mind, is consistently grey. So I think we operate in a spectrum where it's how grey you are. But regulation that at least gives you some targets will give you some black or white in terms of what you're aiming for as a company, and that will give some clarity and I think narrow the spectrum on where the grey is that you're operating inside of.
Shabbir, can one generalise and say in that particular sector we can expect some BE deals to have unwound and new deals need to be done, and those top-up deals that you referred to?
Absolutely. I mean, if you look at the mining sector, there's going to be a review of the codes or empowerment itself and the level of empowerment next year. So we would expect there to be some level of activity to the extent that those companies need to top up. A lot of the mining deals were done at underlying subsidiary company level. You know, we expect that there's going to be some activity to flip those deals up to holding company or listed company
Wow,
level.
what's the significance of that?
We think that, you know, from our conversations with our clients, that dealing with multiple BE parties has become tedious and difficult, whereas consolidating them at one central level makes it much easier for them to deal with those various groupings.
And those groupings, at the beginning, Greg, certainly at the beginning and maybe midway through that process, there was always the usual suspects that happened to pop up as the empowerment partners in many of these deals. We saw that changing.
Definitely, because I think, you know, if you go back probably 10 years, you're really looking only at compliance. And that was kind of a tick-the-box exercise that I think Shabbir referred to earlier. Whereas today, you're really looking at what kind of value add if I'm going to have a strategic equity partner that's going to come in as an empowerment partner, what kind of value can they add to my business over and above just providing me with compliance? I.e., are they going to be able to help me drive revenue, access new revenue streams, etc.? And that kind of thought process is definitely being thought of from a strategic perspective. But you've still got a number of transactions that take place with a combination, which is probably what we're seeing more of. So historically it was doing a deal only with, as Shabbir said, some of the personalities, but strategic equity partners. Whereas today you're looking at far more diverse transactions where there's a number of parties involved, and maybe you've got a strategic equity partner with a broad-based group or including staff, etc. So it's a number of different pillars, I suppose, to a BE transaction rather than just having one.
So as one would expect with something like this, it was new ground. There's been a maturation in the different kinds of personalities, the diversity, the options, the different ways in which the deals could be structured. And also with that, many of the BE players now having built up their own balance sheets with which to fund the deals.
Absolutely. What we're finding in discussions with our clients is that those BE parties that actually started off early on when BE was first promulgated in South Africa, a lot of them have matured. An example is the Touche Group and Kagiso Holdings. In 2011, we assisted them in merging their operations. What we will find is more and more of these BE groupings, whereas in the past they were doing very scattergun type of investments, they're very, very focused now. Almost they're running their business as a investment holding company or as a private equity company and using pure private equity principles in their investments. Another phenomenon that has arisen is we found that a lot of the BE parties now actually have cash. So they can invest using their own cash, whereas in the past, in the early days of BE, there wasn't much cash around for them to make those investments.
And this is perhaps a meat for a discussion further down the line, Greg, but that opens the door to the whole idea of the way in which the deals are structured. Whereas in the past it might have been a great deal of debt, so you've got more options now, maybe MES financing, a bit more equity from the BE players themselves.
Yes, I think two things. I think number one, the way in which they're structured, and number two, the way in which they're funded, because they're linked, but they are two separate ideas. So definitely.
What trends are you expecting there?
I think we've seen a notable trend in the funding side away from having external funding. So if you look again, probably 5-6 years ago, there was a whole lot of transaction done with external funders where they were using commercial financial institutions to fund transactions at incredibly high percentages. So the leverage ratios were kind of 90 to 100%, and it was only a nominal contribution from some of the BE participants. That we've certainly seen move away from external funding structures towards more internal funding structures, where companies have realized that although there's pros to having external funding coming in, there's also cons in the form of you might end up with a stakeholder who's got a significant say in your business who's not actually a shareholder. And that talks to the environment that we've been in, where a number of transactions are underwater, etc. And effectively the BE shareholders don't make the decisions as to what should happen with regards to dividend distributions, with regards to capital investment and how they run the business.
Shabbir, so what I'm hearing from what you've told me this evening is that the empowerment partners have truly become empowered, more of a say, more control over the way that deal is structured and funded.
Absolutely. Not only have they got more control, once you've got your own cash, you can determine how you want to participate. And a lot of our clients are saying to us that we'd like to invest. We act as a private equity investment holding company, and yes, you get the added benefit that we empowered, that we give you the empowerment credentials.
Thank you very much for your time. Really good to have you here. Thanks to guests Shabbir Norath from Nedbank Capital and Greg Benjamin from Deloitte and Touche. And that's it for this week's edition of Deal Flow. From me, Erica Funnemadovitz. Goodbye until next time.